Hi, I'm Steve from the Rooted Podcast, and I hope you can join me every weekday for a 5-minute or less devotional word study or insight into Scripture to add to your day. Welcome to Fruit Snacks. Hey everyone. In today's episode, we are going to look at Psalm 3. Now, this is a short psalm, so I will go ahead and read it in its entirety here so that we have context. Starting in verse 1, a psalm of David, when he fled from Absalom his son. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. Selah. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. Selah. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people. Selah. Now, to go back to the beginning of this psalm and set some context, we know, because it's written and recorded in the psalm, that David wrote this when he was fleeing from Absalom, which, as a quick backstory, this was a time in David's reign when he was older. He had been on the throne for many years at this point. And many of his sons and his children had grown idolatrous. They had grown rebellious. And his son Absalom was upset with him for other situations that happened in the course of his reign, which you can read about in the historical books in the Old Testament. But in any case, what Absalom was doing during this period in Israel's history was launching a coup for the throne against his father David. And David is on the run for his life. So it's during this time that his entire kingdom, his government, as it were, is actually after him because a coup is underway. And even though David could look at things from the outside, from a human perspective, as many in the first 2 verses are doing, and conclude that David has no hope, that this is a hopeless situation, David knows that it doesn't matter what the situation looks like from a human perspective if the Lord is on his side, which is his conclusion. And that's a very difficult conclusion to come to in the midst of life and death circumstances, but even just very stressful and difficult situations that we find ourselves in. And yet, David walked with God closely enough that he understood that God had never left him, that he was still God's anointed, even though he wasn't on the throne at the moment, but that God would be his shield, that God would carry him through. And he even says in verse 5 that essentially he slept, and the only reason that he woke again was because the Lord is sustaining him. So he's understanding that God is the one who is keeping him alive. God is the one who is allowing the breath in his lungs to continue to enter and to exit. And if that is the case, if God wills that he continue to live, then there really isn't anything that anyone else can do about it. And so the only other thing that I want us to see here in this psalm is David's perspective on vengeance, which is also difficult to arrive at in the midst of hard circumstances, especially when we feel like we deserve to be vindicated, as David certainly did here. He says in verse 7 that you, the Lord, will strike all my enemies on the cheek, and that you, the Lord, will break the teeth of the wicked. In other words, David is leaving vengeance and justice and retribution up to God. Even though David is justified in wanting and seeking those things, he is not willing to take them for himself and for his own sake. He is willing to leave justice with God. And I think that is a very important takeaway and a good reminder for all of us that no matter what your circumstance, no matter how difficult, no matter how oppressed or ill-treated you might be as a Christian, whether it's in your workplace or in your neighborhood or wherever, calling out to God and leaving justice with Him is one of the most profound ways that we can demonstrate that we truly trust Him, that we trust that when it's all said and done, He will handle it. And by leaving circumstances and the resolution of those circumstances in God's hands, we say to God, we trust you. And that is a challenge for all of us as we face difficulties in our everyday lives.